Welcome, everyone, to our latest NCAA social series. I'm Andy Katz. I'm pleased to be joined by Amy Wilson. She is the managing director of the NCAA Office of Inclusion. In her previous life, she played basketball and softball at Illinois College, Division III school. And we're going to go over the Title IX report in the 50th anniversary year of Title IX. So even before we get to the report, I wanted to mention your previous athletic life just to get a sense from you as a former student athlete. What did Title IX mean to you personally?
Well, thank you, Andy, and great to be with you today and have the opportunity to talk about this milestone anniversary of Title IX. And yeah, I have very fond memories of that time playing sports at Illinois College. And, you know, we won, my teammates and I won the women's basketball championship for our conference in 1993. So I am going to date myself a little bit. But wow, is that a vivid memory? And I don't remember the score. I know we won. I don't remember the score, though. I just remember the people and just what an amazing experience that was. And so I thought about that a lot yesterday on the day and how grateful I am that there's been a law like that that has opened up those opportunities, because I know I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today if I had not had the opportunity to be a student athlete.
So let's dive deeper into this report. There were certainly some pros. I don't know if I'd necessarily say cons, but areas to work on, because we've come a long way and there still is certainly more growth to go. So let's first deal with student participation, comparing male and female student athlete participation. What did you find in this study?
Well, there is a trend that has been continuous since Title IX was passed in 1972, and it's something to celebrate. The trajectory of participation for male and female student athletes has continued to rise together. That's a good thing, because when Title IX was passed, and there was a realization about a year after the law was signed that it applied to athletics, there was a major backlash against it, and a lot of worry that if women entered the scene, that it would be the demise of men's athletics, and it hasn't been. So I think the great part of the story is that the participation opportunities have grown together. What we're paying attention to are things like there still is a gap. So, you know, right now across all of our campuses, you know, there are about 56% of the student athletes are our men's programs and about 44% are women. So there's still that gap there. We know that more women are going to college today than men as well. So we want to pay attention to that. Title IX is a law about accommodating the interests and abilities that are there. So we want to pay attention to that. We also want to be looking at, you know, our student athletes in all of their identities. And so when we think about our minority student athletes, a lot of them are playing certain sports. So for example, female student athletes of color are congregated in sports like track and field and basketball at about over 60% of our participants. So it's thinking about how do we grow the numbers and how do we give access to more sports to more of our student athletes that are becoming more and more diverse as the years go forward.
So I want to myth bust something here, because I think it's an incredible crutch. And, you know, to me, it is lazy when years ago, this is not as much now, but during the course of this study over, you know, a 20-year period, it was easy to say, well, we had to cut these men's sports because of Title IX, because we had to get our numbers up, and football brings it so much. When in reality, you know, money is money, and there's no reason an athletic department could not have created a way to save X sport, just the way you fund, you know, 10 strength coaches, or you find ways to fund these other entities within certain sports. There are ways to do and distribute it equally if you want to keep sports. So help me break that myth about why Title IX was not the result of canceling men's sports.
Yeah, so Annie, thank you. You really did a nice job summarizing that. Title IX has been the scapegoat, and there's very intentionally a section in the report that looks historically since the late 80s until now, what are the net added and dropped teams for men and women. And it's really close, and it's really interesting. The only division that has more men's drop teams than women's, you're looking at Division I, where more of the money and resources are. So you're absolutely right. With careful planning, strategic planning, and making decisions about all of your student athletes, what's good for them, we can certainly avoid that. And the Office for Civil Rights that enforces Title IX has said, you know, in their guidance to schools, this is not a law about taking away, right? It's a law about accommodating the interests and abilities are there. And so if I can just for a moment share a really positive story about what you just said about the blaming of Title IX. For a lot of the 80s and into the 90s and even the 2000s, the wrestling community and Title IX have had an adverse relationship. It's been a lot of wrestling programs that have been dropped and schools have said it's Title IX. Our emerging sport program for women, wrestling, has the most teams in that program and is on its way to being a championship. And what I've seen happen in the last 5 years or so, men's wrestling leadership, women's wrestling leadership, all coming together, and the sports are rising together. So I think one of the great stories on this 50th anniversary is a sport that's had a, kind of a divisive relationship with Title IX. Not only are we going to see hopefully it do better for men, but women rising with it. So there are lots of other ways to look at this. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, first of all, it's all about prioritizing.
Yes.
So I don't want to hear athletic directors claim that they couldn't pull it off.
Right.
When in reality they could. They are choosing to prioritize certain sports, certain staffers above another sport, certainly on the men's side. All right, so I had to get on my soapbox there. So let's talk about the coaching aspect, because that has grown, but there's still an issue of men coaching women. Not that there's something wrong with it, but we need more women coaching women, getting them in to sort of the feeder system of being grad assistants, assistant coaches, and then climbing up, and also making it lucrative enough, I use that relative term, so that it makes sense as a career path, so that the money is obviously maybe not equal, but at least better than it has been. What'd you find in that part of the report?
Yeah, you're right. People are shocked to hear that when we look at all three divisions across the NCAA, that nearly 60% of the head coaches of women's teams are men. You're like, wait, what'd you say? I always get the double take on that. And so, I want to clarify, we have amazing male role models and great male coaches coaching women. And it's not about, asking them to step aside, but you're right. It's a pipeline issue. How do we get young women who love sports, who want to, give back to that, see that as a profession? And so, we work with a number of different organizations on that pipeline. We have a great leadership development program at the NCAA that is finding student athletes who want careers in athletics and really trying to move that forward. And you might say, well, what about the assistant coach pipeline? Are there more women and women's teams? And it's 50-50 when you look at women's teams. 50% of the assistant coaches of women's teams are male and 50% are female. So the numbers are a little better, but not a lot better. So we've really got to be strategic about how we grow those opportunities, because we want our young men and young women to have both kinds of, all kinds of diverse role models. And we're better when we bring more diversity to the table, for sure.
All right, how would you compare divisions 1, 2, and 3 in this study in terms of equity within Title IX?
Yeah, there's some, it's interesting. Division 1 has the lowest gap in the participation rates between men and women. It's only at about 6%, but they have the biggest gap in the spending differences, right? Division 3 has the best numbers for female athletics directors, but has the lowest number of diverse student athletes. So there's just lots of different things that you can look at, and it's very interesting to get into the numbers and what each of the divisions, areas where they may need to focus. But it's an important point, because one of the great things about the NCAA is those 1,100 schools that we have are all different sizes, all different missions. The bottom line is that we all serve our student athletes. So, and as a Division III athlete who also got a PhD in an FBS institution and worked in athletics there, I've seen it on all ends of the continuum. And what I can say is, no matter if it's, top 5 FBS or if it's a small Division III school, these opportunities are empowering student athletes. So, we want to be cognizant of the special challenges of each of those divisions. But in terms of spending, participation, and leadership, there can be a bit of a different focus for areas to work on at each of those divisions.
I'm going to get to leadership in a moment.
Yeah.
Facilities, though.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have seen a crazy growth.
Right.
Certainly in Division 1, in the high-profile revenue streaming sports. What'd you find in terms of where Title IX has affected, hopefully positively, new facilities in primarily women's sports?
Yeah. So the data that we collect, and over 30 or 35 different data points from our member schools, gives us some highlights of that. But what's really interesting about Title IX is that it's all about student athlete experience. So we have seen the spending on the women's side go up. It's not like, it's kind of like participation. It's going up for both. Just that gap sort of stays there. So we are seeing better facilities built for women, and that's great. But you have to think about, when you look at your student athletes on your men's program and your women's program, what is their overall experience in terms of the types of facilities they're playing in? So it's not a Title IX violation to spend more on a facility because you need a bigger one to accommodate 70,000 people who will buy the ticket, whereas your volleyball or whatever other facility might not be. But it's all about what experience does a student athlete have within that facility. So I caution people against always looking at the money. You have to think about, how is that money impacting student athletes? And that's something a lot of people don't understand about Title IX. They think when they look at the numbers, there's automatically a violation. There's not, but you have to dig deeper.
And here's a shocker that people may not know, but is true, is that travel, as an example, is equitable in terms of charter travel in NCAA championships, men's basketball, women's basketball, but it is not at the individual school level. Once again, that is a choice, that is a priority that some schools will decide, okay,
Right.
Our men's basketball team, our football team is going to travel via charter. Our other sports, women's basketball, softball, is not.
Yeah.
And they make that choice. What did you find, if any, about those amenities,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term, of how they are unequal?
Right. So it's difficult to track that on an aggregate or national level. But what I can say is that Title IX covers 3 areas: participation, scholarships, and then the area you just talked about, the treatments and benefits, which are how you travel, what you eat, your facilities, the uniform you wear, all of those things that I say matter most to a coach or a student athlete or even administrators. So if schools are doing what you just said, we're going to allow our men, this many of our male student athletes to travel in this way, and they're not providing equitable treatment on the other side with some of the women's teams in a proportional way, that's going to be a violation for Office for Civil Rights to look into. I mean, we try to help schools do the right thing, and then the Office for Civil Rights would be the one that would enforce it. So those sorts of decisions can be setting up for problems later if we're not careful, because that is definitely one of those treatment issues that falls under Title IX.
Well, and I'm still waiting to see, some of those video tours of the new housing for exclusively only female athletes. We see them time and time again, these lodges, these housing for the men's side that look like palatial, luxury apartments. And we don't see that yet for the women. So again, this is another issue that a lot of these schools have to catch up on. I mentioned leadership. And we are seeing more and more athletic directors and conference commissioners that are women, light years from 10 years ago, 20 years ago. What did you find in terms of the numbers and how that is growing?
Yeah, so when Title IX was passed, 90+% of the administrators and coaches of women's teams were women, right? There was no money in it. There was not a lot of prestige yet. And it was 80% athletic directors, and it just fell off a cliff. So down to 20%. What we have seen in the last decade or so is that number is inching up towards 25%. So it's a slow climb, but we are seeing progress. I attribute that to the NCAA investing money in things like our leadership development programs, our partnerships with groups like the Minority Opportunities Athletics Association, or MOA, Women Leaders in College Sports, We Coach. There's a lot of national organizations working on this too, and they partner with us. So it takes a lot of intentional efforts. And I'll just be honest, Annie, as a call out to leadership, it takes, presidents and chancellors and leaders in higher education who are willing to say, I'm going to give a female a chance. I'm going to give a woman of color a chance to lead this conference, or to lead. I was just on a panel in Washington, D.C. yesterday with Sonia Steele, the commissioner of the MEAC, and with Heather Like, one of the 5 women who are ADs and FBS, right? The Power 5. And these women are rocking it, right? They're doing great. So we need more leaders to give these amazing women a chance. So we'll hope we see that happen. But it's been a slow climb. And I think the more they're successful, I'd love to see it, and I know you would too, as a dad, as a girl dad, that we don't see it as taking a risk. we just look and we see that's an awesome leader, and we're going to, give that person a chance to lead. Not, well, if it's a woman, it's a chance or a risk, or so I'm hoping we can change that narrative.
Well, and also I would hope if they're watching these, headhunter firms,
Yes.
The search firms that so many schools rely on for hires or interviews, that they really broaden their pool. We've seen it,
Right.
but they need to continue to do
Right.
even more of that. All right, so now we've looked back. What are some things you can see in the near future? We know that, television rights will be coming up,
Right.
that you can see that will continue, this trend in the right direction.
Yeah, I think, there's been some events of the past few years that have certainly called attention to how is society overall, and especially the world, the corporate broadcast world, valuing women's sports, and what is the values. I think we're at a really pivotal point in history where we have a chance to redefine that. And, resources, money, that matters. And so I'm looking forward to the NCAA getting a chance to in coming years to see what we can do with the amazing product we have for all of our student athletes to offer the world. And I'm hoping there's a ripple effect there, right? And in professional sport and at all levels. Because I think there's growing interest, right? We're seeing more seats filled. We're seeing, a lot of the men in my family were glued to the women's softball championship, and it was great, So, it is a pivotal time for us to look at that. And I think too, the area of Title IX that sort of gets lost in the shuffle is one you've referenced, lots of times. What is the experience like on our campuses for our student athletes? And so that's very much on the mind of the NCAA as we work on our championships and improving equity, and we're making strides. So hopefully the membership and our schools, we can rise together in the coming years so that all of our student athletes feel like, gosh, I trade places with you. And while it may not be exactly the same because of historical differences or different things with the sports, I trade places. It looks pretty good over there on the other side. So I'm hoping we're going to get to that point.
How much are we at a critical juncture of ensuring that we continue the momentum beyond this 50-year anniversary? Yeah. I mean, there's so much going on in the public space,
right?
That we need to make sure that the momentum continues, whether it's the grassroots level, high school, college, NAIA, JC, conference, all the way to Washington, where you just were at the congressional level and beyond. How do we make sure that momentum continues?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a lot of really smart people committing to getting around a table to looking at pros and cons of decisions, because from everything to NIL to student athletes as employees to a lot of the transitions and changes that are being discussed across intercollegiate athletics, those are going to have ramifications to broad-based athletics programs that want to increase participation and spread out those opportunities. And, we're unique as a nation. We have a kind of a central belief that these experiences in athletics as part of education empower and help our student athletes reach their potential. So I would just hate to see programs on campuses start to shrink, right? So we're only going to invest in those programs that make a lot of money, right? And not even the ones that have potential to make money. So I think we have to have visionaries who can look down the road 10, 15, 20 years, 50 years and say, this decision now could lead us there. Let's really stop for a second and see if this is the best way forward.
And what's so great? We've seen the last year, put the sports on, they will rate, they will be watched. People will sit in the stands. Oh, here comes NIL. Oh, it's just for men's basketball and football. No. Plenty of female athletes are doing quite well in the NIL space and will continue to do so.
Right.
And so again, it all comes down to opportunity that we want to continue.
Yeah, it does. You're right.
So look, before I get out of here, where can people find if they want to do a deeper dive on the report?
Yeah, so if you go to ncaa.org and click on inclusion, it's all over our front page. So on the top bar, there's an inclusion button. Everything is there. It's been covered pretty widely by the media and the reports out there, but it's on ncaa.org. And not only is the report there, but our Title IX at 50 celebration webpage is there. I just want to commend our member schools. We've been highlighting a lot of what they're doing to celebrate this, and our conference offices, our schools have really embraced this, and the celebration is going to go on, right? This call to action all the way through next year and March Madness and all three women's championships, divisions 1, 2, and 3 at the same location. So we're going to culminate the celebration there. and find out more about that and resources, right? How do you comply with this law? How does this work? We provide that sort of support for the membership. So we're here, hopefully, as the national office works on doing better, the membership is engaged as well, and we can all move forward together. It's so important. I mean, gosh, I mean, outside of athletics, women who played sports, 90+% of our CEOs have sports somewhere in their background. I mean, you can just look at all sorts of data outside of the world of athletics. Girls and women who play sports are finding a lot of success later in life and attributing it back to this experience. So it's a great time to renew our commitment.
Well, Amy, thank you for your exhaustive work on this, your advocacy, which I know will continue. And as Amy says, you can go to NCAA.org, not just for the Title IX report, but of course, NCAA.org/social series, where all our social series are archived. Amy, thanks again for taking some time out of your schedule. Love the shirt. And to everyone out there, continue the fight. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Andy.